Ted Bundy is a well-known serial killer that admitted to killing 30 young women, but could have killed even more. He was born on November 4th in 1964 to an unwed mother. His grandparents did not like this, so they took him in as their own, but the mother was still in his life. He was told that his grandparents were his real parents and his mother was his sister. Some say that Bundy had psychological issues from birth because when he was little, his aunt said that she woke up with knives surrounding her, and Bundy was just standing at the edge of the bed smiling. His grandfather was an abusive bigot who beat his wife and was abusive to neighborhood animals. It is said that he once threw Bundy's aunt down the stairs for oversleeping in the morning. It is thought that his grandfather also was a schizophrenic or had some other type of psychological disorder because he was often seen having conversations with no one. His grandmother was timid and unable to stand up to the grandfather. When Bundy was 4, he and his mother moved from their grandparents' house to Tacoma, Washington, even though he still thought his grandparents were his real parents. He did not find out the truth about the real parentage until he was 23. His mother/sister got married and had kids with a new man. As a result of this, Bundy felt distance from his stepfather and step-siblings. Bundy felt resentment towards his mother for getting married and for not telling him the truth about his parents and never talking about his real dad. All of these are many reasons as to why he was violent in the future. When he was in high school and growing up, he never really had any friends and, according to others, never made an effort to make any. This shows that he was never socially inept, which can be big signs of psychological issues. Also, during high school, he was arrested twice, which shows criminal-like behavior. His mother was not supportive, so struggled with guiding him, which does not help him with any of his issues. He eventually went to college and then went to law school. He stopped attending law school, and at the time was studying how to improve the criminal justice system. Him stopping attending school was a warning sign about the issues as well. The first series of murders took place in 2 different states, Washington and Oregon. Though he claimed that his first attempt of kidnapping and murder took place in New Jersey, that he was not successful. If we listed all the names and stories of each of the girls, it would take a really long time, but he killed 3 girls in Washington. 1 of their bodies was never found, and 5 in Oregon, and all of them are found. In Washington, female college students disappeared at the rate of 1 per month in the first half of the year 1974. In King County, Washington, police posted flyers with a possible sketch of Bundy, and 2 people came out and recognized Bundy as a possible suspect. Even though this happened, they were given almost 200 tips a day, so they did not believe that someone who went to law school and had no adult criminal record was capable of committing these crimes. The remains of all the girls, except 1, were stumbled upon by hunters and study groups in the woods. In the second series of murders, the 3 states that were involved were Utah, Idaho, and Colorado. He moved here because he was accepted into law school in Utah. A month after him starting school, the second string of murders began. It began with the one that he confessed to, which was a hitchhiker in Idaho, whose body was never found nor identified. In Colorado, 7 girls were killed, and 1 of their bodies was never found. In Utah, 3 were killed, and 1 of their remains was not found. On the border between Utah and Colorado, 1 girl was killed. Again, if we were to tell you the stories of each killing, it would take a long time. In 1975, Bundy was pulled over in Utah for speeding. The officer that pulled him over found many items in the car, including a ski mask, handcuffs, rope, an ice pick, and many other burglary items. Bundy tried to give explanations for why he had each of these objects in the car, but the officer that pulled him over recognized the car and his face, so they took him in, but did not have any evidence to detain him, so they let him go. Even after this, he was placed on 24-hour surveillance because of the resemblance of the wanted person. After a while, Bundy would eventually sell his car to a teenager. Once the police found out about this, they had the car impounded. They found many different strands of hair and identified them as bodies he had killed and 1 victim that had survived. They took this victim to a lineup and she identified Bundy as the killer. In court, they were not able to link him to other cases, but only to hers. He was arrested and sentenced to serve a minimum of 1 year and a maximum of 15. He tried to escape, but the guards found him and gave him solitary confinement for several weeks. This made him dislike the criminal justice system even more, which caused more hate to build up in him. In 1977, Bundy was transported to a courthouse for a hearing, and decided to be his own attorney. Because he was his own attorney, the judge did not require restraints or shackles because he needed to move around. During recess, Bundy asked to visit the library to research his case. He ended up hiding behind a bookcase and jumping out of the window, thus escaping. Bundy ended up stealing a car, but a police officer pulled him over when he was weaving in and out of lanes. Once he was detained again, he started formulating a new escape plan. He ended up obtaining a map of the jail he was in and a hacksaw from the other inmates. While most of the guards were on Christmas break, he sawed a hole in the ceiling, and because he had forced himself to lose so much weight, he was able to get out of the small hole. He changed into street clothes that he found and walked out of the jail. He ended up staying on the road for some time and moved around as he should, but eventually ended up in Florida.
After escaping jail, Bundy went to Ann Arbor, Michigan to watch his alma mater UW beat Michigan in the Rose Bowl. Then he stole a car and went to Atlanta and got on a bus to Tallahassee, Florida. He wanted to get legitimate employment once he got there and refrained from any criminal activity and stay under the radar, but when the job application asked for ID, he went back to his old ways. On January 15, 1978, 1 week after arriving in Florida, he entered the FSU's Chi Omega sorority house through an unlocked door. Starting at 2:45 a.m., he killed 21-year-old Margaret Bowman and 20-year-old Lisa Levy and seriously injured 2 other girls. He did this in about a span of 15 minutes. He then went 8 blocks away and attacked FSU student Shirley Thomas, leaving her completely deaf and ending her dance career. Then on February 8th, he drove 150 miles to Lake City Junior High, where 12-year-old Kimberly Leach was asked to go to her homeroom for a left purse and never returned to class. Her body was found 7 weeks later. Then he felt like the police was closing in on him, so he fled Florida with a stolen car, and at 1 a.m. he was pulled over for the stolen car, and when he was told he was under arrest, he kicked the legs out from under the cop and ran, and the cop chased and tackled Bundy, and after the two wrestled for the cop's gun, he had gotten Bundy in handcuffs. In the car there was the IDs of the FSU students, 21 stolen credit cards, and an outfit he wore to disguise himself. When Officer Lee was taking Bundy in, he didn't know he had just arrested FBI's 10 most wanted fugitives, and he heard Bundy say, "I wish you had killed me." Following a venue change to Miami, Bundy stood trial for the Chi Omega homicides and assaults in June 1979. Despite the presence of 5 court-appointed attorneys, he once again handled much of his own defense. Bundy got offered a plea deal where he would plead guilty to the deaths of the 2 sorority girls and the 12-year-old and get a 75-year sentence instead of death. He was going to take the deal, but then at the last second he changed his mind and said he would have to admit he killed them and he couldn't do it. The jury found him guilty after only 7 hours of deliberation of the murders of the sorority girls, 3 counts of attempted first-degree murder, and 2 counts of burglary. 6 months later, he was convicted of Kimberly Leach's abduction and murder after only 8 hours due to the eyewitness testimony who saw Bundy leading her from the schoolyard to the stolen van. During the penalty phase of the trial, he took advantage of the Florida law that a declaration of marriage in court in front of a judge constituted legal marriage. He then asked Carol Ann Boone to marry him, and she said yes. Carol Ann Boone was the one who testified on his behalf in both trials. In October 1982, Boone gave birth to a daughter and named Bundy as the father. On February 10, 1980, Bundy was sentenced to death by electrocution, which was the 3rd death sentence, and would be the one carried out 9 years later. After the death penalty sentence, he finally opened up about his crimes, but only talked in third person to avoid the stigma of confession. He talked about how everything he owned was stolen, and he said that the payoff of this was possessing whatever he had stolen. Possession was the ultimate motive for rape and murder for him. He said sexual assault fulfilled his need to totally possess his victims. At first, he killed to eliminate the possibility of getting caught, but then it became a part of the adventure. He said that the ultimate possession was in fact the taking of life and then the physical possession of the remains. Once a date was set for his execution, he confessed to going back to the dumping grounds and doing sexual acts with the decomposing bodies, and also putting makeup on the girls' faces and continually washing their hair after they were dead. He also saved the severed heads of multiple girls. He even confessed of several murders that the police had no idea about. Hours before his death, he contemplated suicide because he didn't want to give the state the satisfaction of watching him die. Ted Bundy died in the Radford Electric Chair at 7:16 a.m. on January 24, 1989. He was 42 years old. Hundreds of people across the street of the prison set fireworks off and sang and danced and cheered loudly as the hearse containing the body left the prison. His body was cremated and then scattered in an undisclosed location in Washington state in accordance with his will.